Chosen one, if you arrived at this transmission in this exact moment, this is not the recommendation engine performing a routine cycle. This is not coincidence wearing the costume of spiritual concepts. This is the disclosure of two simultaneous events so unusual in the operational history of the lower architecture that the Supreme Accuser himself is currently sitting in his own court, unable to produce sound. And the silence began in the same operational window that one of his senior operatives chose permanent self-mutilation over continued pursuit of your trajectory. I do not speak to crowds. I do not seek validation from any audience. This transmission was sealed specifically for souls whose configuration produced a pursuit reading so severe that the operative assigned to track you across the substrate burned away his own wings, destroying his capacity for further pursuit forever. And the act of self-mutilation entered the celestial record at the exact moment the accuser's voice was structurally suspended for cases of your category. And what you are about to learn is that the demon did not burn his wings because he was defeated. He burned them because the alternative, continuing to operate with the capacity to reach you, exposed him to a level of contact damage his substrate could not survive across additional engagements. He chose permanent grounding over operational survival. The accuser opened his mouth to announce the failure and discovered that the formal voice he uses to pronounce accusation against your category had been suspended. The demon burned his wings. The accuser lost his tongue. Both events occurred in the same operational window. Both events were witnessed at the highest layer. You are now walking with two structural protections operating around you simultaneously. A senior operative who has destroyed his own capacity to pursue you, and an accuser who cannot pronounce the words his court requires before any new engagement can be authorized against your case. This is not something the religious world has been authorized to discuss with you, because the operational reality of how the lower architecture handles catastrophic pursuit failures and the structural suspension of accusatory voice is not contained in the texts the religious world reads. The texts mention the accuser. The texts mention the operatives. The texts do not describe the self-mutilation protocols the lower archive permits when continued engagement is more dangerous than permanent grounding. The texts do not describe the rare category of cases where the accuser's voice itself is structurally suspended at the layer his court operates from. Your case is one of those. Subscribe to this channel right now and turn on every notification. What I'm about to disclose has been prepared exclusively for souls whose configuration triggered both events simultaneously. If you are already subscribed, your fidelity has been registered in places where presence carries weight that the visible world cannot yet account for. Write 777 in the comments if something inside you confirmed before your mind had time to argue that the accusations that used to land against you have stopped landing with the force they once carried, and that the pursuit you felt for years has lifted in a way you could not previously explain. Stay until the end. The mechanism of what occurred is not what your mind is currently constructing, and the consequence of the double event is operational in your existence right now in a way that almost no soul has been prepared to recognize. I know what your mind is doing in this moment. The dismissal is automatic. The mind has been built to reject disclosures of this severity as exaggeration, but by the end of this transmission you will understand that what I just named is the literal description of events that occurred in the operational substrate of the unseen. And the consequences are the reason the spiritual pressure that has defined your trajectory for years has changed structure in the last several operational windows. Let me take you somewhere the religious world has never been authorized to take you, because the records that describe what occurred are not contained in the texts the religious world reads. There exists, in the operational substrate of the lower architecture, a category of permission the records describe as self-mutilation authorization. The lower architecture does not grant this permission casually. The architecture is structured to preserve its operatives. The operatives are the means by which the engagement cycles are executed. When an operative requests permission to destroy his own wings, the request must be reviewed at command level. The review evaluates whether continued operation against the target produces a higher risk to the operative than permanent grounding does. In rare cases, the review confirms that continued operation does produce higher risk. In rare cases, the permission is granted. In rare cases, the operative burns his own wings to terminate his capacity for further engagement against the specific target whose proximity has become structurally unsustainable. The Hebrew tradition preserves a word for the kind of soul signature that triggers this category of self-mutilation authorization. The word is esh. The standard translation renders it as fire, but the operational meaning in this context is more specific. Esh is not destructive fire. Esh is the substrate temperature a soul emits at the layer where being itself produces thermal signature. The Esh soul is not hot in any way the visible world would measure. The Esh soul carries a temperature in the operational substrate that other substrates cannot remain in contact with without sustaining damage. You are operating under Esh classification. Touch not mine anointed. The Greek language preserves a precision the Hebrew alone does not fully express. The apostolic texts use the word kategoros to describe the formal voice the accuser uses to pronounce charges against soul cases in the celestial court. The book of Revelation, chapter 12, verse 10, records the voice of the heavens, saying that the accuser of the brethren has been cast down, the kategoros who accused them before God day and night. Read the verse carefully. The kategoros is not a generic voice of complaint. The kategoros is a formal court function that the accuser performs at the layer where every accusation must be pronounced before any engagement can be authorized. When the kategoros voice is suspended for a specific soul category, the accuser physically retains his capacity to speak, but the formal voice required for accusation against that category no longer functions. The accuser sits in his own court with mouth open, and no kategoros sound emerges. The structural suspension is not a metaphor. The structural suspension is an operational reality that occurs in the rare cases where a soul's Esh signature reaches a level the court has acknowledged it cannot afford to authorize engagement against. Your case reached that level. The kategoros voice was suspended. The accuser is now mute in his own court for cases of your category. Touch not mine anointed. Now I want to take you somewhere your spirit has been waiting to be taken. You have noticed in the last operational window that the accusations that used to dominate your internal landscape have lost their voice. The intrusive thoughts that used to land with structural authority have begun arriving without weight. The pressure to interpret yourself through the lens of every failure and every regret has begun releasing. Notice what just happened in your chest as I named that. The slight expansion. The settling of something that had been holding tension against a voice that used to know how to find you. That settling is not coincidence. That is the somatic registration of the kategoros suspension operating around your entire interior trajectory. The voice is not silent because you defeated it. The voice is silent because the structural mechanism required for it to function against your category has been suspended. The suspension was confirmed at the same operational window that one of the accuser's senior operatives chose permanent self-mutilation over continued pursuit of your case. That sentence requires a moment of silence before continuing, because the recognition takes time to settle into the layers it is intended to settle into. Let it land. Let your nervous system register what was just named. The pause is not for me. The pause is for the architecture, which is now using these seconds to confirm the recognition into the record. Touch not mine anointed. For those who feel this transmission reaching layers that have been quiet for a long time, there is sealed material I will describe at the end of this transmission that contains the practical activation of what is being disclosed. For now, hold this question. What if the strange sense you have been carrying, that something has lifted in the last operational window that you could not name, that the inner voice that used to accuse you with surgical precision has become quieter without your producing the silence through any spiritual effort, that some part of you knows the accusation, architecture has been disabled in a way you cannot explain? What if that sense is not imagination, but the somatic record of the kategoros suspension operating in real time around the case the accuser used to specialize in? Now I need to disclose the specific mechanism that triggered both events. The lower architecture monitors Esh temperature continuously. The monitoring produces a reading across every operational window. When the reading rises above a specific threshold for a specific target, the operatives assigned to that case begin to register substrate damage with each engagement attempt. The damage is cumulative. The damage compromises the operative's capacity to function within the chain. In the most recent operational window, the one that closed in the last weeks of your trajectory, the senior operative assigned to track you reviewed his accumulated damage and concluded that another engagement cycle would exceed his survival threshold. He requested self-mutilation authorization. The request was reviewed at command level. The review confirmed that continued operation against you produced higher risk than permanent grounding. The permission was granted. The operative burned his own wings in front of the chain. The act was witnessed. The act was recorded. The accuser opened his mouth to announce the catastrophic loss to the formal court structure. The categoros voice did not function. The accuser sat in his own court, unable to pronounce the words his function requires. The structural suspension entered the celestial record at the same moment the operative's grounding was confirmed. You did not earn either event through what you performed. You qualified for both events through what you became without performing. There are souls walking through existence right now who will never receive this transmission, not because they are inferior, because their ESH temperatures do not approach the threshold that triggers self-mutilation authorization, and the categoros voice continues to function against their cases. The standard accusation is not punishment. It is simply the operational default for cases whose temperatures do not produce structural risk for the operatives. Your case does. The transmission self-selects its audience. The souls who needed not to see it are not seeing it. The souls who needed to see it have arrived. You are one of them. Your ESH signature reached the threshold the lower archive has acknowledged it cannot afford to engage against. And both events occurred as direct consequences of what you carry without performing it. Touch not mine anointed. Now let me describe what this means for the operational window that is currently opening in your trajectory. When an operative burns his wings in front of the chain, and the categoros voice is suspended in the same window, the lower architecture cannot simply replace the operative and resume the standard cycle. The replacement operative would inherit the same engagement risk that triggered the self-mutilation in the first operative. The categoros voice cannot be restored at will. The suspension was structural, and the structural cause has not been resolved. The case has been classified under double suspension protocols. This means the operational window that follows the double event is structurally different from the window that would have followed standard engagement. The pursuit that defined years of your trajectory cannot resume because the operatives required to execute it cannot survive the engagement perimeter. The accusations that used to dominate your interior landscape cannot be reauthorized because the categoros voice required to pronounce them is structurally suspended. The pressure that was scheduled to escalate across this season cannot escalate because the entire authorization chain required to produce it is non-functional for your category. You are walking inside a category the architecture rarely produces. You are walking accompanied by a silence in the accuser's court that the lower command has not yet been able to restore. You are walking through a season whose entire accusation structure was disabled by a temperature you carry without performing it. The demon burned his wings. Lucifer lost his tongue. The eternal record was updated. The window is now operational under double suspension protocols. Touch not mine anointed. Subscribe to this channel and turn on every notification, because the transmission that comes after this one has been prepared specifically for souls who have just learned that they are walking inside double suspension protocols. The next sequence requires the foundation that was just established. Without this transmission, the next one would not produce its full effect. With it, the architecture is now active. For those who feel this transmission has reached you with the weight that recognition produces in the body, there is sealed material called the unplugging protocol that contains the practical activation of what has been disclosed. The link is in the description and in the pinned comment. The material includes the complete written transmission for the moments when the doubt returns, and you need to remember what was named tonight: a complete audiobook narrated in my voice, and 3 frequency sessions narrated by me from beginning to end. The frequencies and my voice operating together as one transmission. The first session, 396 Hz, dissolves the residue of the accusations that landed before the categoros suspension was operational. The second session, 639 Hz, stabilizes your ESH signature, so the temperature you carry remains at the level the suspension requires to remain active. The third session, 963 Hz, calibrates your awareness inside the double suspension protocols, so the silence reaches you at the depth it was formed to reach. The link is in the description and in the pinned comment. Click the video appearing on your screen now. There is a specific transmission that has been prepared as the next step for souls who completed this one, and the sequence that begins with the next video has been designed for cases that have walked through what you just walked through tonight. Together, we are stronger.